The Odyssey of Homer. The Odyssey of Homer. The Odyssey is coming out soon in cinemas. And probably by the time you see this video, maybe it'll already be out. So to mark the occasion of the release of this big Hollywood blockbuster, I thought I would do a video about sea voyages, like, things to rival the Odyssey, perhaps. I love boats, both in real life and in fiction. I love a good boat setting. And you'll probably start to find out why or get a sense of like the things that I like about them as I go through this list. But before we get properly started with the list, I want to mention one which is kind of an honorable mention, kind of half edging onto the list, because it is, apart from the Odyssey, maybe like the great book, at least in the Western canon, about like being at sea, a big sea adventure. But at the same time, I think a voyage has to be from A to B, right? I feel like voyage means you're trying to get from one place to another. Whereas Moby Dick by Herman Melville is about whaling, right? It's a whaling expedition. So anyway, like, I also feel like it doesn't really belong here in a way because I've only read half of it. I was defeated by the book. It begins as a sort of adventure story, and then we have these different episodes on land, including like this really memorable queer one, which has got all this homoerotic tension in it, like kind of quite clearly spelled out. There's also another one in a church, which is great. And then we get to sea, and the book becomes this sort of encyclopedia. It's got this encyclopedic like experimentalism almost, the way that it talks about whales. And I loved every moment of it, but clearly I couldn't get that kind of momentum needed to kind of push through such a big old book. But I know it's out there just waiting to be read. And ever since then, I honestly feel kind of like I'm Ahab and the book is the white whale, and I just got to catch it. I just got to go out, catch it, and read it all the way through. And one day it'll happen. While we're on the topic of sea voyages that aren't actually sea voyages, but about hunting animals in the sea, the Crab Cannery Ship by Takiji Kobayashi is a great kind of sea book. It's like kind of like hell if hell was on a boat. We follow this boat trawling through the icy waters between Japan and Russia, and they're just hauling up crab after crab and shoving them into these little cans. And the narrator explains to us at the start that any laws that might protect workers from exploitation in factories don't apply to boats out on the open sea. So this is sort of like an area which is ripe for exploitation. The descriptions in this book are so wild and over the top, but it works because the sea is churning, the hull is creaking, everything is so precarious, but at the same time relentless. It's sometimes even gothic, actually. Like there's this one scene with a corpse and a blanket over it, and there's a candle, and there's the swaying of the boat, and the candle, the blanket and the candle are both kind of moving. And I don't know, it really stuck in my mind. At the same time, what's being described so vividly are all like real life conditions for these workers, right? Even though it seems so fantastical, we're hearing about the suffering that exists under the worst excesses of capitalism. So it's like, it's got this gritty realism to it, almost like documentary like sometimes, while feeling wild and fantastical. So I guess that contrast really works. That also helps the fact that this is an unashamedly communist book. It wears its red flag on its sleeve. The boss of the ship is this cartoonish villain, and like we kind of know from the beginning that the only way things can work out well is if the workers gain class consciousness and seize them into production. But there's no heroes in this book. Like the workers are often brutal to each other. They're like deeply flawed in a very human way. And it does feel like, we're documenting what happens to them because there's nobody else who will. Anyway, these are the bleakest crabs you will read about in your life, I can guarantee it. This next one was also written, I think, in the 1920s and is also, I presume, set in that period. It's called The Events on the Banbury, written by Witold Gombrowicz, a Polish novella / short story. It's kind of like in that in-between place, I think, between extremely long short story and kind of short novella. This one's a proper voyage at last. We follow Zantman, who has become tired of like the tediousness of life in Europe, and he just needs to get on a boat and go somewhere. He knows a British guy who can get him on a boat, and so he goes to get on that boat, but he kind of gets late and he gets up late or whatever, and he ends up in a big rush and he gets onto the wrong boat. He was supposed to get on the Berenice, instead he gets on the Banbury. The boat is going from England to Argentina, and that's totally fine for our main character. He just wants to get away. And what follows is, I don't know guys, this was a weird one. This is hard to describe. A lot of strange things happen on the Banbury, hence the title, I guess. And like, it's sort of Alice in Wonderland-y in a way, because they're all quite surreal, sometimes grotesque, some of the weird things that happen during this trip. Sometimes it actually reminded me of Junji Ito, the horror manga artist, because of the body horror things involved. But it's the way that people react which makes me think of Lewis Carroll, because it's sort of like a world where the logic is different. It's not like something crazy happens and everyone is screaming, oh my god. It's like everyone deals with the problems as though they're not such a big deal. So I guess it's kind of magical realism as well in that way. As the story goes on, our main character becomes less and less satisfied with his escape, or maybe less and less convinced that this was the way to get out of whatever he was trying to get out of. And at the same time, the events on the ship start to get a little bit more dangerous. To take just one example from when things are starting to get quite bad, one morning he wakes up and he finds an eyeball, a human eyeball, on the deck of the ship. So he's not too flustered because, like, again, everyone's just kind of calm about everything, or like low-key worried. Maybe it's a Polish thing, I don't know. But like he walks very quickly to get to the first mate and tells him, on the starboard side of the ship, I found a human eyeball this morning. And the first mate's reaction is to say, those bastards, they're starting to play the eye game. And it's like, what? What is the eye game? What does that mean? What's going on? Is this a thing that happens regularly with sailors out at sea? And like, it sounds like kind of Jurassic Parky sort of vibes are going to start here. And it's just like kind of horror, but also really funny. Like it just gets funnier and funnier, and also scarier and scarier. I took so many notes for this one. This is the best thing I've read so far this year, so I imagine I'll talk about it more towards the end of the year. But for now, let's move on. The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis was, for a big chunk of my childhood life, like my favorite nautical adventure, my favorite sea voyage. It's one of the books in the Narnia series, and it was definitely my favorite. I don't remember why they're on a voyage. They're going, I think, to the end of the world, or the edge of the world. And I just have all these scenes from that novel like imprinted forever in my brain. The characters are great in it, like going especially after the first Narnia books, where we have these sort of really boring, anodyne, good children, apart from one of them who's a traitor, but then he becomes whatever. But like this one has like a really nasty kid, Eustace, as one of our main characters. So that was really good. There's also a mouse, a talking mouse called Reepicheep, and he's got like a rapier and a little hat, and it's adorable. I don't know how it holds up, honestly. I imagine there's a lot of Christian like metaphors being shoved down your throat, but maybe not. Maybe it's very subtle about that kind of messaging. I would like to read it again sometime, but it was like quite significant for me, so I felt like I should mention it here. Another one which is very significant is The Winners, or Los Premios, by Julio Cortázar, translated here by Alastair Reid. I really have been like kind of haunted by this. Oh no, bookmark! Well, I don't know where that was. But this book has kind of haunted me for a long time. I've soft DNF'd it twice now. And I really, this one, the last soft DNF is really soft. Like I feel kind of like I'm still reading it. I don't want to take out these bookmarks. That's why I'm kind of sad that this one fell out. But yeah, I'm trying to dual read it, like Spanish and English. And it is tough. There's a lottery in Argentina for a cruise. And these people, like of all different social standing, like rich people and poor people, all different walks of life, they all win tickets for the cruise. And it's kind of all done by the government. And it's very mysterious. No one knows what the boat is, where it's going, and like anything about it. Just that it's like a fully paid cruise, right? And they all are I haven't got to the boat yet. I'm in the prologue. Trust Cortázar. He's one of my favorite writers, but his prologue is, let me see, where does it go to? It ends here. So this much, and it starts pretty much like on the first page. It starts there, right? Look at that. Prologue, and then like this much of the book is prologue. So I'm still in the prologue, and they're all just gathering in the cafe and talking to each other, and it's all conversations. And the thing that's incredibly difficult, I find, about it is that it's just names, so many names. It's like a dramatis personae where they list all the characters, and they give you like a little kind of snapshot of who they are. But it's quite a long bit of narrative, and instead of like explaining who they are, it's dialogue. So I find it very difficult to kind of remember who's who, and we kind of switch between tables at the cafe where they're all waiting to go on the boat. But yeah, they are now moving towards the boat, and then I kind of stopped. And I'm going to have to kind of refresh to remember who all these people are, but I just found it very difficult. There's also some kind of philosophical things, like there's one character who's like a philosopher, and we get some of his point of view and stuff. Like, I found it incredibly difficult. I've always been enchanted by this idea of a mysterious boat cruise where everybody has won something, but you know, the lottery is also kind of scary. Like, if you think of lotteries like ancient Greece, like the Minotaur, you know, like that's how they pick people to go down to the labyrinth to get eaten, was by lottery, right? So everyone being on a boat and not knowing why they're there, and like all forced to kind of socialize. I mean, this is one of the boat things that I like, right? Like, it's a little space floating through an infinity of waves, and you're just in this confined space, kind of forced to talk to all the people around you, or interact with them in some way, right? It just makes for good storytelling. So I've always known about this, and I've always wanted to read it, and now I actually have it, and I'm really struggling. I saw that it got republished not that long ago, like last year or something. I was so shocked. In Bath, I saw in the bookshop there was a vintage edition of it now. So it used to be, like, at least in the UK, like super rare to find this book, and now it seems that it's very easy to get. I haven't like cracked into it yet, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm just on the eggshell, like kind of tapping at the eggshell, trying to get into it. Like, I don't really know what this book is, so I at least need to find out what this book is before I can talk about it properly. Next up is Dracula by Bram Stoker, and you'll notice this one is a bit different from the ones I've talked about so far, because it's not a nautical book, right? It's not a Sea Voyage isn't like the whole book, or the main basis for the plot or anything like that. That's just one section of the book, but for me, it's the most memorable section. And after Voyage of the Dawn Treader, then this was the Sea Voyage that really like stuck in my mind as like kind of the most memorable, iconic, like, I don't know, I love it, right? The Voyage of the Demeter. There was a movie out actually, and there's been other books, I think, just based on this part of the book. That's how good it is. And all that section is very simple. It's just these people bringing a cargo from Romania to the UK, right, to Whitby on the south coast of England, and they've got, you know, these big boxes in the cargo that they're not allowed to open. And at night, crew members go missing. You know, fog rolls in, and one by one, people are vanishing from this boat. And like, it's the captain's log, so it's the captain like recording the event. So it kind of makes sense that he would record anything strange that happened on the journey. So it's very plausible. Sometimes in these Gothic stories, it's not plausible that people are writing down every weird thing that happens around them, right? Like, in this case, it works. It really makes sense that he would be writing this down, because that's his job, is to keep a record. And it's just really scary, and it just feels really modern as well, like a kind of a slasher movie or something like that. This idea of like the narrowing down of people until all you have is the one left who's keeping the journal of the freaky things that are happening. And it also makes sense that it would be that one character, because he's the captain, so Dracula needs him to steer the ship to get it to the UK. It's also an immigrant story, but like with teeth. So, you know, I love it. Next one is Babel by R.F. Kuang, and this is another one, obviously, where it's not a whole Sea Voyage nautical book, but there is just one section of the, kind of two sections actually, of the book where they're making a voyage. It's a research trip from England to Hong Kong, I think. And this book is like a magical school, kind of dark academia novel. So a lot of it is the setting, right? A lot of what people like about these books are the setting. And the way the whole book works is like the characters learning together and taking classes together. And I thought what I liked about it particularly was the way that the magic that they're learning in school integrates into not only daily life that we see in this world, but we see like kind of, you know, these kind of macro systems, political power, geopolitical movements. Something that I thought was a weakness of the book was the characters. I did not think that the characters were really interesting at all. So even though I normally love it when, you know, everything is stripped away and characters are just shoved onto boats and they have to live with each other for a little bit, you think that wouldn't work in this case because the characters were not interesting. It was the world that was interesting. So stripping away the world and just shoving the characters into a boat at sea would, like, presumably, you know, showcase the weakest, in my opinion, part of the book. And yet it worked. Maybe it's just boats. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the magic of the ocean, just the freshness, just the change of pace. You can feel the sea air, and the characters are just kids really, and they're just like kind of, they've got their friendship problems and they're kind of not talking, but then one of them is talking to the other one, and it's just nice. It's like we're reading a different book for a moment, but like it's just drama. It's just nice drama. And so that, coupled with all the descriptions of the boat, were so nice. And then on the way back, things get even more dramatic. Like the character drama like escalates quite a lot. There's even a missionary now on the way back who kind of got kicked out of China, and so she's on the boat on the way back with them. And her, she just adds so much of an interesting kind of funny dynamic to the social group there. And like I said, there's like really serious things going on, but they're trying to hide it from her. So there's kind of like, it's serious, but there's an element of farce, and it's just fun. I would say that R.F. Kuang is quite good at introducing a very minor character who has just a tiny role to play in the book, but making them stand out, because I really remember that missionary. I wanted her to be in it for the rest of the book, to be honest. So yeah, that was a good sea voyage, very memorable. After that, I thought the book really went downhill, but the sea voyage was great. Then we have The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Sorry, I tried not to blind you there with the cover. This is another one of those ones, like the Odyssey, like Moby Dick. It's just one of those iconic stories in Western literature about being at sea. It's a romantic poem, and it's just got really great imagery. It begins with this wedding, and there's an old mariner there, and he kind of grabs one of the wedding guests and says, "There was a boat." And the guy's like, "What are you doing, crazy old man? I'm trying to have a wedding, blah, blah, blah. Not have a wedding, be at a wedding, whatever." The old man is just like, "There was a boat," and just keeps talking. And the wedding guest kind of feels like he has to listen to him. So he sits down, and then we get the story of what happened to this old man. It's not pretty. It's like kind of phantasmagoric images. I don't know if that's the right word, but we get some supernatural things. There's the albatross that he has to hang around his neck. There's water everywhere, and yet not a drop to drink. Just things that really stick in your mind. And so, yeah, it has to be on the list, really. I realized that a lot of these voyages are pretty ghostly and horrible, but like, maybe those are the best kind. I don't know. This next one isn't, though. This is the Tosa Diary, or Tosaniki, by Ki no Tsurayuki. I have it here in this collection of Japanese poetic diaries, appropriately decorated with a wave. It's about a woman whose son or child has died quite recently, so she's grieving and in mourning, and she is making a boat trip back from the bit of Japan that she's in to her hometown, Kyoto, I think. So it's not really like out on the open seas kind of voyage, but it is a journey by boat, and it's not by river either. It's like going on the inner seas of Japan, right? Like between the islands. So I think it counts. The thing that's most notable about the Tosa Diary is that it's the first of a new genre at the time in Japanese literature. What this writer calls poetic diaries, basically diary literature. And these are like kind of prose, but they're broken up with haiku or other kinds of little poems. And it's a whole form of like kind of building up with the prose and then kind of puncturing what you were building up with the poem, or else kind of creating a balance between poem and prose. She's talking about what they did on shore, and then they get on the river, and then she sees some trees, and then we get a poem about trees or something like that. And it's just like that all the way through. There's not really a plot. It's just vibes, right? It's just purely vibes based. And I think it's great, but I think it's better if you know kind of how experimental it was at the time, right? The way that he wrote it, Kino Tsurayuki, was that he pretended to be a woman writing a diary, right? Like he said, that's why it's fiction, right? But he writes at the beginning, so men keep diaries, I hear. Let's see if a woman can't try her hand at the same thing. And the ironic thing is that it's a man writing as a woman, because during that time, the official diaries were usually kept by men and written in Chinese. But by him writing as a woman, he could write like in Japanese, which was usually like kept for women. There's a whole thing. I'm not going to get too into it, but he's basically like, it's a guy in drag writing so that he can write this, like create a kind of more emotional form of writing at the time. And then like it becomes very popular, especially with women, unsurprisingly, in the years to come. And it's a great genre. It's kind of like a photo diary of a trip, you know, like you're writing the things that happened as in a diary, and then the haiku is like a photo of just something, right? Just like a still image of some natural occurrence, or not like a tree or a bit of wave or whatever, I don't know. And yeah, like I really love this genre, and knowing that this is the first one makes it quite special for me. And I don't know, it's like, also, although the vibes are really chill, like reading it now, if you know that it's so experimental because it's creating a whole new genre, right? That kind of gives it something extra, right? Like the balance between I'm reading something that feels really chill, but actually it's really crazy because no one's done it before, right? So I don't know, it's like a really interesting piece of work. And finally, I want to round things off with the Tristia by Ovid. The Tristia by Ovid, like my favorite poem, I think, ever in the whole world. And this is like for many reasons, which I won't get into here. But basically, Ovid, my life, my love, the Roman poet, got exiled from Rome to this place, like kind of on the coast of the Black Sea in modern day Romania, like kind of the backwards journey of what Dracula did. Yeah, from the capital of power to the outskirts of Romania. Dracula, he's going to London, and in this he's, you know, going from Rome. So yeah, the imperial capital, let's say, to the outskirts of Romania, rather than the other way around. But at least Dracula had like a castle and stuff like that in Romania, right? Like Ovid's, you know, has to give up his fancy middle class lifestyle for what is for him barbarity. That is like, there's, you know, warring Celtic tribes all around that area. It's like, it's a military outpost, basically. So he wrote the Tristia after he arrived there, and he describes his departure and his journey, and then most of it then is just his life there, like recording what it's like there. And complaining and asking to be brought back to Rome. But the bit that I'm referring to here is specifically the part where he writes about the voyage, right? The voyage where he has to go from Rome to Romania. And the reason I'm talking about it last is because I wanted to create a sort of circularity and go back to the Odyssey, because what Ovid says is Odysseus had it easy. You know, we go on about how difficult it was, and Homer goes on about all the suffering that Odysseus had to go through, but he only had to go from Troy to Ithaca, right? I'm going from Rome to Romania, and like, you know, on the map of it is going much further, right? So he compares himself to Odysseus, like, I think definitely more than once. He's always making comparisons to Greek myth because that is what he's good at. He's like kind of a walking encyclopedia of Greek mythology. So he uses that to illustrate his life and, you know, the things that he goes through. But the sea adventure especially is difficult for him. It's written beautifully. But also like the kind of the sassy complaints about, you know, Odysseus having it easy and me having it really hard, kind of sums up a lot of what his voice is like, what his poetic voice is like throughout the Tristia. Tristia is like lamentation. He is just lamenting. And I love it. You know what? I'm going to do one more. I'm just going to throw in a TBR here because I think it's quite an interesting thing to add to the list. I really want to read The Voyage of the Beagle by Charles Darwin, right? Which was this 5-year voyage that he took around the world when he was a younger man. I don't know how old he was actually. I presume he was a young man, but he was just like gathering the materials, you know, the raw materials into his mind and into his notebooks that he would then develop into his theory of evolution, which he wrote about in The Origin of Species. And I don't know, like, I understand it's not a very nautical book because he's not a very seafaring guy, and he talks more about what he finds on land. So maybe it's not appropriate so much for this list, but it is a voyage. And the idea of just sailing around the world and looking at animals and plants from everywhere, and, you know, just creating this sort of like knowledge base that later is going to become something so fundamental that like changes everything. And I love the theory of evolution. I love evolution. So like, I don't know, I feel like it would be almost spiritual probably to read this book. I've really built it up for myself now because maybe it's just boring. Maybe it's just like describing like lichen and rocks. But, you know, rocks can be cool. Maybe I'll be liking the lichen. I need to stop this video now. Please comment below, what is your favorite voyage, sea voyage in literature? Or just like anything water, nautical, Odysseus themed. Let's talk about it down in the comments. I'll catch you in my next video. Kanikosen!